Hello, my name is David de Alba. That's my stage name. My real birth name is Heri, Heri. I was born in Camagüey, Cuba, and I'm going to give you a little narration, a condensed narration of my life from Cuba to the present time. So I better hurry up because many years have passed by since. When I was a little boy in Cuba, I was a little boy once or twice, it was so much fun because that was before Castro, when Cuba was at its best. Beautiful nightclubs and restaurants, American companies owned, many businesses, and life was glorious. Not just because it was a beautiful island of beautiful trees and ocean and homes and churches, but there was a fun, the music, the food, and the family, which was destroyed eventually by the communism that Castro brought and destroyed the island. But meanwhile, being a little boy, I used to go from Camagüey once a year via the train, because my grandfather was he drove a train. He was what they call a train driver, and my parents took me, Tila and Heri Senior, to Havana, and I would go to see my idols, Cuban singers, Olga Llorens and Tony Alvarez, sing at the CMQ TV and Radio Progreso, and then I would go to eat some wonderful strawberry pies and cakes that a very famous pastry called La Gran Via made, and we didn't get those desserts in Camagüey because they didn't distribute it through the island. But one thing that was very interesting, as a little boy, I was raised, of course, my grandparents, my grandmother and my mother, Catholic, but they also believed in what they call el espiritismo. And being a little boy, I was able to see spirits. I would see a guy urinating against a wall, or when I went to bed at night and we had this flying net, we call it mosquitero in Spanish, I would feel the hands of a spirit almost choking me, and it was a terrifying experience for a little boy. So my cousin Soledad Redondo, we call her Chola, she asked my spirit guide to take away that power I had to see, or whatever you call it, talent, and since that time I have never seen a spirit in my life. My grandmother did, and this is a very interesting story before I go on with my life. She sort of believed in spirit, but she was a devoted Catholic. So one day I think this was when I was born or before, I forgot, but this happened. She was walking in her home, and a spirit said to her, "You don't believe we exist? I'll show you." And he threw her against the wall and broke her arm in several parts. They had to take her to Havana to a surgeon to have it fixed. Then she came back to Camagüey, and she told the priest at the church, "Father, I will come to church, of course, on Sundays, but I'm also going to practice Espiritismo because this happened to me." And the father said, "God be with you, sister, and that's fine." And my grandmother would get together with Soledad, myself, because my mother was working in Camagüey, and they would have maybe once a week sessions in which Soledad or her husband would pass the spirits. And it was very interesting seeing, although I didn't want to see them anymore because I was afraid, but I didn't mind somebody else passing them through. So I would see wonderful, happy spirits and evil spirits, and spirit guides that talk to. But the most funny thing was Graciela was our black maid. She was a black lady, and she cooked and she cleaned the floors. She lived with us. I used to call her, when I was a little boy, Graciela, my black star. Soledad said one day, "You're going to witness something you'll never believe." And it was that Graciela, before she was born, she promised to give herself to become a spiritista, but she didn't know anything about it. So we lived on, we had two stories. So we were on the second story, and what do I hear? Graciela walking on the steps, tick, 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 tick. And then she came into the study room. She sat down. She looked like a robot. She started passing the spirits and good spirits and everything. And then when she sort of woke up, she said, "Where am I? Doña Maria," that was my grandmother's name, Maria. And they explained to her that her spirit guide forced her to come because she promised to do that here on earth. So she said, "No, they don't have to force me. I'll come willingly every week." So from that time, she came every week and helped us with the prayers. Now, to make things short, I was loved. I have my at home we have my mother, my father, my grandmother Maria, my grandfather Francisco, Mario Jimenez, who was the cousin, and Consuelo, my aunt, who came once in a while because she lived outside Camagüey in Santa Cruz del Sur, but she came back and forth. Anyway, so we had a very small family as far as the mother's side. The father's side was a big family, 6 brothers and 6 sisters, but my mother's side was very small. This leads me to say that because I was the only boy born by my parents, my mother was also the only child, I was loved a lot. And when the time came that the militia of this men from Castro that came with long hair and groomed and beards and things like that, we didn't see that in the 1950s in Cuba because men were clean cut and clean shaven and with nice haircuts, and I saw men with machine guns and so on. I became so nervous, I had a nervous breakdown, and my mother sent me already to the United States because before Castro she was able to put some money into an American bank, because once Castro came he froze everything, we couldn't take any money. So I went to a special school for exceptional children in Bradenton, Florida, called Brewster Hall for a year, and I came only with a dictionary, Spanish to English. I didn't know any English, and of course, for my first time in my life, I was alone in a boarding school. But somehow they cured my nervousness, and I became tranquil. So now, after 1 year, there was one more money left in the bank. My mother sent me for the first year of high school in Palm Beach, Florida, at a very beautiful school called Graham Ecke School, which is gone now. Half of the school faced the ocean and the other half was broken by a highway, went to the other side with dormitories and tennis courts and a lake with boats and so on. It was for rich kids. So I was there for a year among very rich kids, and I was the only poor one from Cuba. And then from there was some money left. My mother came with my father and to this country in Miami, but they were very poor because we couldn't bring any money. So somehow, I don't know how, my mother got some governor to give me a scholarship of all things in a military school in West Virginia. And I always kept saying, the school didn't make me butch, but at least one thing I did get from it was the discipline I got in that school went throughout my life helping me. So now, after the military school, finally, my parents moved to Chicago, and they started with very bad jobs until my mother got on her feet to work as a teacher. But at least I was with my parents then, so I finished my high school at Senn High School, and from there I went 1.5 years to college at a college called Wright Junior College in Chicago, WRIGHT. And I won at the college half a scholarship to a beauty school called the American School of Beauty Culture, a very famous school in Chicago, and I became a hairdresser. Now in Chicago, I finished 1.5 years of college. I finished my cosmetology courses. I took extra courses in bleaching and coloring and wig styling and makeup. all kinds of things. My mother says, be the best you can be. So now I became a hairdresser. I started working, but because I always perform, even in schools, in singing, in glee clubs, in Cuba, dancing with the kids in the school. I always had a theatrical flair. I started to do dances in Chicago in nightclubs, flamenco dancing, cha-cha-chas, sambas. But then I met a very well-known hairdresser, which by now, this was in the 60s, I forgot his name. And he said, I want to make you up. Come to my house. So he made me up. He says, for Halloween, I would like you to do Judy Garland. Can you do her? I said, well, I know who she is, but I cannot sing like her. He says, okay, what you do, you take her record, put her voice, and you sing over her recording like a duet. Do not pantomime. So I started to work on the act, and eventually I did a lot of shows in Chicago. I got a lot of publicity. I got to be on TV, in the newspaper. At that time, I was going by my real first name, Heri, Heri. But I thought Garcia didn't sound too good for the show. So I added Del Valle. So it was Heri Del Valle for many years in Chicago performing. When I got through performing in Chicago, and then I went to San Francisco, then the name changed, and I'll explain to you why in a few seconds. Meanwhile, one of the most fun things in my life was when in Chicago I got to meet 3 times Judy Garland. The first time she did a movie in which her voice was behind a cartoon called Gay Paris with Robert Goulet. And the second time she played at the McCormick Place with her daughter Lorna and Joey. And the last time was at Chicago Opera House, and she played with Lorna and Joey again. And I got to talk to her the last time. And so after the show, they lined up the fans backstage in a hall, people like this and people like this. So here I stood up, and my mom Tila stood on that side there, and we waited for Judy to keep talking and talking and coming, and finally she's in front. She says to me, did you like how I sang? I said, of course I love the way you sang. And my mother says, Judy, my son loves you. Why don't you give him a kiss? So she grabbed me and she gave me a kiss on the cheek. And I said, well, when you're young, you forget. I brought a camera to take a photo with her. We had Polaroid camera in those days. I had a playbill. I said, Judy, sign. I was completely like this. So I said to Judy, I impersonate you in Chicago. I do shows. And she says, do you like me that much? I said, of course I like you that much. Then she says, honey, I would love to see you perform, but tomorrow I have to leave Chicago, but I really would love to see you. But one thing that I never forget was when my mother told her, my son loves you, will you give him a kiss? She said to me, this is your mom? My mom was dressed beautifully. I did her hair too. And she became like little Dorothy Gale from Kansas, from the movie The Wizard of Oz. And she said to me, oh, how I wish I had a mother like you have. And I never forgot that, because Judy's mom, Frances Gum, I think I forgot now. Her mom, Judy was called Frances Gum, but her mother, my mind went blank now, sort of abused her physically, like, you have to go to work today even if Judy didn't feel well. No, you have to sing. So she was not kind to Judy. So I guess when she saw my mother being so nice to me, she felt how nice to have a mother like this boy has. I wish I had a mother. So I never forgot those words. So now I'm going to see you in a few minutes, and I'll tell you my story, how my life in San Francisco began, which was a big turn in my life. One of the happiest moments I ever had. So now, Judy passed away in 1969. I left Chicago. Now I go to San Francisco, and I'm going to do a condensed version. 1970, I got to meet the partner of my life, who was with me for 46 years until he passed away in 2017, Paul W. Reiner. My parents left Chicago. I retired from school and bought a home in Potrero Hill. And Paul and I, we bought a home in Potrero Hill, a few blocks away from my parents' home. Eventually, I found this lady by the name of Anne, who was an Italian lady who was selling her beauty salon. So my parents helped me buy, because Paul was broke in those days because he got divorced. He had to pay a lot of alimony. So my parents helped me buy the shop. And then Paul helped to put a marquee, and we call it with my real name, Heri, Stylist of the Stars. So now I become a well-known hairdresser, because I had a lot of pictures from movie stars that I met through the years that were autographed to me, and we put it on the wall. So a lot of the women say, oh my God, you know this one, you know Susan Hayward, you know this, you know. Now, there was a famous nightclub called Finocchio Club, owned by Mr. and Mrs. Joseph and Eve Finocchio. Both are dead now. And that club existed for 63 years in San Francisco. First at a different location, and then the last location where I performed was on Broadway Street in San Francisco. And I was hired by Mrs. Finocchio to be the Latin American singer for her review. The star of the show eventually became my good friend. In fact, his name was Paul Laverne Cummings, and I knew Paul Laverne Cummings as long as I also knew my partner, Paul W. Reiner. But Laverne Cummings was the female impersonator, main star of the show. He sang the American songs. But Mr. Finocchio needed somebody like me to sing to the many tour buses from Puerto Rico, Bogota, Colombia, many Cubans that lived already in San Francisco, people from Spain, from Italy, from Paris, France. So I did all these beautiful songs like De noche cuando me acuesto le rezo a la Virgen de la Macarena, y allí solita en mi cuarto a mi Virgencita le cuento mis penas. Oh, yo soy esa oscura clavellina que va de esquina en esquina, volviendo atrás la cabeza. Lo mismo me llaman Carmen, que Lolilla, que Pilar. Con lo que quieran llamarme, me tengo que conformar. Oh, que tú me gusta, que yo te gusto, que son cositas que van parejas. Que tú me gusta, que yo te gusto, que son cositas que van parejas. Pero lo que más me gusta es como te gusto yo. Y también cantaba yo, I used to sing, Arrivederci Roma, goodbye, adiós, au revoir. Quiero caminar las mismas calles, quiero suspirar las mismas penas, volver a besar los mismos labios, ay de mí. And then Miss Finocchio says, you also have to sing in English because people, so they know you are bilingual. So then when Liza became well known because of the movie Cabaret, I threw my Liza act in, and because she knew I did Judy, I would do Judy once in a while, but always stressing. So I'll tell you how my name came about. The MC of Finocchio, Carol Wallace, a wonderful performer who became a very good friend of mine, couldn't pronounce my name. He would say Harry, Eric. And my partner says, this is ridiculous. So he took David from the Bible and de Alba from the Duchess of Alba, and David de Alba was created. So now, Paul says we should give a name to your act, not just David de Alba. So we saw an old movie, and in the movie, in Polish, somebody said the word boy chick. So Paul said, oh, that's perfect, boy chick. So I tell Carol Wallace, Carol, I have a name you can pronounce, and I have a name for my Latin act. So he says, okay, I'll surprise you tomorrow night. So I'm standing, ready to go on, and Carol is announcing, this was a lovely introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring to the Finocchio stage the warm and charming personality of David de Alba as boy chick. I said, oh my goodness. So I come out as boy chick. Of course, I was young, so I looked very pretty. My eyes were very nice looking, my hands, my legs, and I could sing in a high voice, so I fit the bill perfectly. So from that time, stuck forever, David de Alba, and my Latin American act, boy chick. One of the funny anecdotes, many, but one of the funny anecdotes was that one evening I had to break a very complicated French medley. I hope I remember. It went like this. Es la luz de tu mirar lo que me hace soñar con dichas infinitas. Son tus besos de pasión lo que mi corazón y mi alma necesitan. No hay por qué. Entonces went into vamos a cantar que la vida es alegre y fugaz. Nunca te dejes abatir. Canta tu canción que el canto es amor y felicidad. And it went on to other things. And then I said to myself, what's going on? They had a whole tour of French people clapping and so happy. So when I got through my act, I left through the wings, and this old gentleman with a cane and a little beret says, Mr. de Alba, will you please wait? And I said, yes, sir, may I help you? He said, oh, Miss Piaf, Edith Piaf, the great French singer from Paris, will be all smiles in heaven if she could have heard your tribute to her. I said, oh, thank you so much. And may I ask who you are? He said, oh, I forgot his name now. He says, I played for Miss Piaf several times in Paris. So in those days, there were no cellular phones to take photos like now. So I said to Carol Wallace, the MC, Carol, you can't buy this publicity. So of course I did that act many more times during my stay at Finocchio's, and it was always received very nicely. But not all the time you have a whole bunch of French people from Paris to come to hear you. Another thing that's very funny was I got to meet the real Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders. Not the ones you see now on the stores, the real one. So in San Francisco during the 70s and 80s, they used to have a promotion that when you went to buy Kentucky Fried Chicken, they will give you for free one strawberry pie. So I went to the Kentucky place on Polk Street, and they said, I'm sorry, we are out of strawberry pies, but we'll give you a rain check. So I took so I went, and that night at the show, I don't know if you can see this here, these feathers, maybe you can photograph the feather. I wore these feathers around me, and I said to the audience, do you like my feathers? And they clapped. I said, this is a bunch of dead chickens from Kentucky Fried Chicken that I got these feathers from. And they clapped. Then I told the story that they gave me a rain check because they were out of pies. And all of a sudden, in the back of the showroom, a white apparition happened. The real Colonel Sanders was there, so he stood up and he said, I can just hear him now, boy, if you ever come to Tennessee, I'll give you not just one pie, but 2 or 3 pies. And he sat down. When I got through the act, I said to Carol, Colonel Sanders was here. People thought this was part of my act. I didn't know he was here. So next day, the newspaper wrote that Colonel Sanders was a Pinocchio. He caught David de Alba's act. Of course, I did the song and my act all the time afterwards, but the impact was not the same because he wasn't there. So, I mean, sometimes things happen that you don't expect. And that was why Pinocchio was famous, because we had many movie stars, from Lucille Ball to Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner and Richard Chamberlain, Phyllis Diller, Liberace. All these famous people came to see the show because it was a world famous show with a live band. We didn't lip sync like nowadays. So it was very common to have a movie star sitting in the audience maybe once or twice a week, or a big allow dancers and singers from a play like Hello Dolly or Mame. So I was so lucky to be with my partner Paul, to have a beauty salon with wonderful customers, to have wonderful parents, and then to sing as Pinocchios. Life was going so happy. But you know, in life, when everything goes up in happiness, something is going to come down to hit you hard, because this is part of being inside of a body incarnated. So time passes by. Oh, I'll tell you a story before I tell you the ending of this. In my beauty salon, I got to meet Tony Curtis, and the reason why they wanted to do a movie using a beauty salon for a movie, a pilot movie for TV called Spies, S-P-I-E-S. And after a big turnout of that, the producers went to different beauty shops in San Francisco, and they took the photos back to Hollywood. They said, no, this is too fancy. No, we don't want this. They finally found my shop because the producers were exhausted, and they went to eat at a very beautiful restaurant. I don't know if it still exists, called the Brasserie inside the Fairmont Hotel, where a lot of the movie stars that played the Fairmont went to eat in the middle of the night. And Paul and I and my mother, we used to go there to eat breakfast. And the producer said to the maitre d', I don't know what to do anymore. We don't know what to do because we can't find a beauty shop for the movie. So the maitre d' knew who I was, so he mentioned my name. He said, why don't you go to see this shop in Potrero Hill, because this is a mom and papa store, because my mother, when she retired, she came to help me as my secretary. So at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, they went inside my shop and they started taking photographs of all the movie stars on the wall. And when they went back to Hollywood, the person in charge said, we want this salon. So I was chosen. So the day came when Tony Curtis came, and of course I was working with some of my customers, and the women went crazy. Oh, Tony, I've seen you. And he was charming. He said, you couldn't have seen me. You're too young to have seen me. Oh, no, I've seen all your movies. One of them, a very colorful lady by the name of Joan Carrison. I used to do her hair, very different hairdos and all kinds of different colors. She was... Anyway, when Tony said to my mom and I, may I use your bathroom? When he came out, I was doing Joan's hair. She says, excuse me, Heri, I had to go to the bathroom too. So I'm waiting. Tony's just sort of looking at the shop. She comes out. And she says in front of everybody, maybe there were 3 women there, Tony and the hairdresser from Tony and a cameraman. She says, now I can tell everybody I sat in the same toilet that Tony Curtis sat. So Tony goes like this. He says, I didn't know my Fanny was also famous. Now, another customer of mine, who's dead now, sweet lady, Aida Corver, she said, oh, Tony, I would like to have a photograph autographed by you. He said, I don't have any photos. Oh, I'm going to go home. She ran across the street to her apartment, and she brought, of all things, a photograph of her wedding picture with her husband, but whose name was John. He said, "Oh, Tony, will you sign my wedding picture? Are you sure?" "Yes, please." So he signed the wedding picture for Aida. And he says to me, "I don't see my picture here." I said, "No, I wanted to buy one, but I couldn't find one. But I did bring a record in which you appear with Jack Lemmon and Marilyn Monroe from the movie Some Like It Hot," and he autographed my. So he said, "Let's go outside in between shootings." So he took me to meet the producer and the director and different people involved with the movie. He says, "This is David de Alba. He works at Finocchio's." I take off my hat to him because when I was working in drag for the movie with Jack Lemmon was horrible. Hours and hours waiting with the makeup and the costume, and he does this not just for a movie but every night at Finocchio's. I never forget that. So this is some of the wonderful things. I have many more anecdotes that happened to me while I was working in my salon and Finocchio's. But then in 1989, my longtime partner Paul lost his job because the company merged. A company came and bought from Texas this company, and all the so-called big shots like Paul, who was a project manager, they were let go overnight after maybe 30 years working. So I come home from the beauty shop, and our home at that time was in Santa Cruz, which was a beautiful place near the beach. And he was white like a cloud. He says, "I lost my job." And within 2 days, he had a mild heart attack. They gave him what they call angioplastic, and he was okay. Now he is starting to apply in many places in California. The people that he helped along through his life, nobody came to help. So finally, after applying, he found a job in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A very good job, equivalent to what he had in San Francisco area, in the Bay Area. So he says, "Well, we have to sell our home, sell the beauty shop, and say goodbye to Finocchio's. We had to move." So my parents, who always follow me around, we found a buyer, sold the house. I told Miss Finocchio I won't be able to perform anymore because I'm moving. And I told my customers, many of them were crying because I did their hair for many, many years, and they were like part of the family. And they knew Paul. Many of them had invited me and Paul and my parents to eat at their home for lunch. So it was a very stressful moment for me and everybody. Now we go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and to make things short, from New Mexico eventually we moved to Arizona, and then from Arizona we finally landed up here in Las Vegas. In 2008, my mom passed away. It was a horrible thing because she and I, we were so close. Out of 10 things, we got along with 8. We like the same performers, Olga and Tony, Judy Garland. We like dogs, we like birds, we like espiritismo. We blend in so many things, like we were like twin souls. So when she died, half of me died. I used to walk around with her. I couldn't walk anymore on the street, but at least Paul was alive. But then 2017 came, a week after his birthday, and we come home from lunch. What happens? He tells me, "Dave, I'm having a heart attack." I call immediately here the ambulance. They come and they tell me. They came and they started talking to him, and he was in perfect condition, talking like I'm talking to you now. He says, "My name is Paul Reiner. How is your pain between 1 and 10? I think he said 8. I just had a birthday." He was very lucid. So the very nice looking male nurse, they were putting all kinds of intravenous things and taking blood from him, and they said to me, "We are going to take him to a wonderful hospital called Sunrise. They specialize in the heart." So I thought, well, people survive heart attacks. And a week before that, he went to the doctor and they told him, you had the blood pressure of a teenager. So they take him in a gurney. An hour and a half later, the phone rang. Mr. Garcia, that's my real name. The doctor wants to talk to you. I thought, well, I'm going to go now to the intensive care or whatever. He said, I am sorry, Mr. Garcia, he didn't make it. And he hung up the phone. Then all of a sudden, everything was like a state of limbo. He didn't make it. Means he's dead. I'm alone in this world. Just my pets and me. What a horrible feeling. To this day, I cannot believe this. I wake up and said, is this a nightmare or is this real? No, it's real. Really? But I want to end with a happier feeling for you. But I just wanted to give you a condensed version of my life, because they say when we go to the other side, we die, they show us like a life review, a quick, like a movie, of all the scenes from our life from birth to death. And then we judge ourselves, I'm told. They say, oh my God, I did this. Oh, I didn't like what I did. Oh, I did this pretty good, but I didn't like this. So I hope when they show me the live review, some of the scenes I'll get a B+, maybe some I'll get a C. I hope I don't get an F, because if I get an F, it means I have to come back here again to this earth. So, so I'm giving you a so-called live review, a short one of what happens. And in between, you'll see some photographs of my family, of my parents, my wonderful friend Linda LeBlanche, who has passed away, who did a musical soundtrack that we are going to use in this film. Pictures of me as a boy in Cuba, and then a picture of me performing, so you have an idea, better idea, when I'm talking through visual means. Thank God for photographs, and thank God for my cousin Mario, who's filming me, because this is going to be, who knows, it could be my last time ever on a film, unless somebody asks me to do something again. It would be more like my own eulogy. I'm going to tell everybody about me, so at least this will float in the air, so whenever I'm not around, they'll say, oh yes, I remember David, I saw him at Finocchio's, whatever. I'll be back in a few seconds.
Ya me cansé de tanto llanto y sufrimiento. Me encojo de hombros y contesto así. Yo soy esa oscura clavellina que va de esquina en esquina, volviendo atrás la cabeza. Lo mismo me llaman carne que la lilla que pilar. Make me feel so bad. You make me sigh, 'cause I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to tell you. I think you're grand. That's true. Yes, I do, did I do? You know I do. I can tell you what I'm feeling. The very mention of your name sets my heart ring. You know you made me love you. Porque la vida es una tómbola, tómbola. La vida es una tómbola, tómbola. De luz y de colores, de luz y de colores. Y todo es en la tómbola, tómbola. Y todo es en la tómbola, tómbola. Encuentras un amor. Tómbola, tómbola. Tómbola, tómbola. Tómbola.
So how can I end this? Because we want to say hello to people, and I hate goodbyes, but if you can go back into your life and see all the wonderful people I got to meet on the stage, and the family members, and Paul, and my friend Linda LeBlanche, and there's no end to the happy moments. Then sometimes when I'm alone, and I said to myself, I don't know, it would be nice to find somebody again, so I don't have to, at least when Paul was dying here, I was able to call. It didn't do any good, 911, but I have no one to call if anything happens to me. It would be nice to meet somebody, to have a friend, to at least when my time comes to call. But they say that when our time is to come, the angels of death, they come by, and you never die alone, because they're always with you, and your family members come. I'm sure Paul will come. So that transition should be not a scary one, but a happy one. Meanwhile, I should sing one song that I always sang in all of my shows. People say, oh, why don't you, I wish I would have sang it at Finocchio, but I sang it in many shows that they did here in Las Vegas, which Judy sang, but she, of course, she had violins and harps and all kinds of instruments. I'm doing a cappella. Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there's a cloud in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow the sun will come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness, although a tear may be ever so near. That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. Good night. God bless. God bless America, and God bless this earth. God knows we need lots of blessing.